the conversation around migrants who live in South Africa. The influx of illegal migrants has worsened crime in Diepsloot. This is according to residents there who have taken to the streets and are blaming government for inaction. This protest comes after the country has seen Operation Dudulain operations in Gauteng and in some parts of Durban, if you like, where we were told that there might be another branch of Operation Dudulain being launched there. Now, the targeting of undocumented foreign nationals is continuing. However, the lawyers for human rights say the Home Affairs system also contributes to leaving immigrants undocumented. Joining me now for this conversation is Lawyers for Human Rights attorney Lindokuhle Mdabe, who talks to us all the way from Durban. Mr. Mdabe, thank you for your time. A very interesting take from your side that migrants who are otherwise legal in South Africa are most of the time made illegal by the Home Affairs system. Explain exactly what you mean.
Essentially, there's a legal basis for why the South African government, for instance, has a duty to accommodate migrants from different countries, and I suppose I could just briefly set out what that means. From an international law point of view, and as well as from a legislative point of view in the South African context, there is an obligation on the South African government to accommodate a number of migrants on different kinds of permits and visas in South Africa, and so there's that obligation that is there. There's a reason why there has been what we could now term a retrogression and a violation of that obligation in the South African context, and why that retrogression and violation has left so many immigrants vulnerable to certain kinds of microaggressions in communities and violence. So I suppose that is the context under which we find ourselves.
Why do you think that there has been this, as you put it, retrogression on the side of government? Why is that allowed, or why has it been allowed to happen?
All right. Of course, the conversation is a long-standing one. But there has been, since the beginning of lockdown, the closure of the RROs, which are the refugee reception offices, where people who are seeking asylum in South Africa are processed and given permits. And so you can imagine, with the closure of those offices, people who are newcomers who find themselves here in this country have no way to, for instance, to be recognized as people who are actually present here, and also have not been able to be investigated, interrogated around the seeking asylum here in South Africa, and so they remain without permits, and they remain without documents.
And I'm sorry to cut in here, and therefore making them vulnerable, particularly to groups that are roaming South Africa right now, looking for those that they quote unquote say are illegal in the country, and therefore cannot prove their legal status here. And I want to use the tragic example of what has happened this morning, Mr. Mdabe. Elvis Nyati is the man who sadly was killed in Diepsloot in the early hours of this morning. And his partner says, talking to us here on Newzroom Afrika, that she was able to produce a passport because the people that invaded their home demanded a passport. So she was able to produce that, whereas Elvis did not have the passport. And I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she suggested that he had been on an asylum seeker's permit. That permit is probably one that is often referred to by those that are in South Africa and in a way are unable to produce a passport. How heavily reliant are migrants in South Africa on this specific permit of asylum seekers? And why is that the common one, I think, that is found or that has been distributed by government?
Yes, the importance of this document cannot be understated. It's important for a number of reasons, and I suppose from a legal point of view, which is often my gaze, this document can mean that one is, for instance, protected from any form of detention and deportation. But also it can mean that one is able to participate in the economic and social life of this country, and I think that is a broader debate, which is now a conversation in the margins. So this is essentially what I think is the impact. So if you don't have this document because you don't have access to a process within which you can access this document, what it then effectively means for you is that you can't access employment, at least not formal employment. What it often means, even though this is not necessarily accepted in terms of our law, but what it often means from people who have to interface with accessing services of either government or financial services is that they often turn away because they don't have this document, which is a basis and the requirement for them to have, for instance, a bank account or to be registered within the Labor Department or anywhere else, or even to participate in this country. So the impact of not having the document is really massive on this community of people.
Let me conclude the conversation with you, Mr. Mdabe, with this particular one, and that is that if the asylum seeker's permit is the one most relied upon, and you have said earlier in the conversation that there has been retrogression from the side of government to issue these permits or to renew these permits, can it be argued, you are a lawyer, can it be argued in a court of law that the South African government has purposefully put people who were otherwise in the country legally in danger and possibly putting them in harm's way?
I suppose to reach that conclusion, they will probably say I'm harsh, but something much more balanced can be said about that. And I suppose something that is I think can be said about that is the fact that the excuse, right, which is COVID, which was there and used as a justification for the closure of the RROs, which was the office that processed migrants, which processed asylum seekers and refugees, is no longer there. And even that excuse during COVID itself was at a certain point a retrogression, because it prejudiced a number of people who could not access this document, and therefore making these people vulnerable. And I suppose at a certain point it was justified, given that the borders were closed. But when the borders remain open at different levels of COVID restrictions, it did not make sense for permits not to be granted to newcomers. There was, of course, a process to renew permits of people who were already in the country, but even that process was administratively cumbersome. It left people vulnerable as well because most people could not get their documents in time. But this is what you see. The entire institutions, both state institutions and non-state institutions, be it the police, have arrested people who do not have documents, but have not gone through the process because the office at the Home Affairs are closed. There is now a vigilante group that is now going around asking for papers. And I think to talk about undocumented people is a red herring, right? Because there's so many South Africans who are undocumented. There's so many South Africans who do not have IDs. The real question, I think, here is about participation. Is about economic participation, and it's about economic opportunities, and the persons or the community that is now bearing the brunt of what is now considered to be a failing state, at least in that regard, are migrants. They are now victims of a certain part of the state that is failing them, that is failing at discharging their international, constitutional, and statutory obligation in law.
Oh, it's a painful situation, but also a complicated one in terms of the legalese. That's the Lawyers for Human Rights attorney, Lindokuhle Mdabe.